We are starting another video series related to theatrical sound production that deals with special sound techniques that can help you take your productions to a higher level. Hopefully you have watched the videos in our first series that deal with the fundamentals of sound production as they directly relate to the theater, and hopefully those videos will provide you with some useful information that will make your production a lot easier and more successful. But we want our shows to be the best they can be, so what can we do beyond the basics that will help make the show even better? One of the tools that I like to use is delay. And basically, it's a tool that I would really encourage you to become familiar with if you're not accustomed to necessarily using it, or you're not really sure whether the systems that you're working in are using delay. I would really look into it because it's something that can really help take your show to another level, because it can really create a much more natural experience for the listener. So my goal is always that I want what I hear to reflect what I see. And in the theater, that necessarily isn't always easy to accomplish. Now, you may be in a situation where you don't have access to any processing for the Haas system. And so if that's the case, there's really not much you're going to be able to do. But let's say you're either bringing your own system with whatever processing you have available to you, or you're accessing the Haas system and you have access to that processing and you're able to adjust delays, specifically on the main speakers. Okay, so why do we need to deal with delay in our sound system, and more specifically on our main speakers? Well, actors produce sound when they speak and sing. That sound is going to travel throughout the venue naturally, without the assistance of a sound system. It may not be very loud in places, but it's still there, and especially in the front rows. If they're wearing microphones, their sound is also going to come out of the speakers, and if unprocessed and no other factors are affecting it, it will come out of the speakers at basically the same time as the sound comes out of the actor's mouth. Of course, the speakers are probably going to be louder than the actor's natural voice, so we're going to hear the source as being the speaker. Also, the speaker in many situations is going to be closer to the audience than the actor is, so it's possible that you will hear the speaker before you hear the actor. Now, it's unlikely that the time difference between what you hear from the speakers and what you hear from the actors will be large enough to create an echo, but that doesn't matter. This brings us to a psychoacoustic principle known as the Haas Effect. This principle basically states that when two instances of a sound are heard within 40 milliseconds or less of each other, they are perceived as being one sound, and the sound we hear is recognized as the source. Beyond 40 milliseconds of time, and separate instances of sound will begin to develop, which is what we usually refer to as echo. If we hear the speaker first and the actor within 40 milliseconds, we hear that as one sound, but will generally recognize the speaker as being the source. So my goal as a sound guy, anytime I'm doing a show, is I always want what I hear to reflect what I see. So that means that when I'm looking at the stage and I see all this activity happening on the stage, I would expect that the sound would seem to come from the stage. I want it to come from the actors. I don't want the sound to be perceived as coming from 40 feet up in the air or 30 feet up in the air or all the way out at the side walls, because that's an unnatural experience. There may be something you can do to help improve the situation, and that is to delay the main speakers so that the sound coming from the speakers is delayed until the natural sound from the actor has had time to travel that distance from their location to the speaker. Now, the sound from both sources may be arriving at the listener's ears at the same time. Now the effect of the speaker being louder is lessened because it's no longer first. This helps to push the sound back towards the stage and the actors. Now, if we take into account the Haas effect, we know that two instances of a sound can be within 40 milliseconds of each other and not create an echo. If that's true, then it makes sense that we can delay the speakers even more than what is necessary to join the sounds together so that the sound from the stage is actually reaching the listener first. Now the perceived source is no longer the speaker, but the actor. So what's the proper way to set delay? Okay, so for example, let's keep this with the theater. We're going to pick a point on the stage. You can pick a spot about mid-stage to use as your source point, and pick a spot in the house as a focal point. Now, all of the activity won't take place in that one spot on stage, but you have to pick somewhere to use as a point of sound origin so you can set the amount of delay on the main speakers. So let's choose mid-stage, maybe a little bit downstage of center if you think more activity will take place there. Measure the distance from the point on stage to the point in the house, and the point from the speakers to the point in the house. A laser tool is great for this. But let's just say for this example that the distance from the speaker to the point in the house is 25 feet closer than the stage point to the point in the house. If sound travels at a distance of 1,125 feet per second, then it will take the actor's voice approximately 22.2 milliseconds longer to reach the house than the speaker. If we delay the speaker 22 milliseconds, both instances of sound from the actor and the speaker will be traveling together in time. Now, if we apply the Haas Effect principle, then we should be able to delay that speaker by up to an additional 40 milliseconds without creating multiple instances of the same sound. This would help to create more of a sense that the sound is coming from the stage, and thus a more natural reproduction where the speakers are not the focus. You can have an actor put on a microphone and begin talking or singing, and adjust the delay from nothing up to 62 milliseconds in this example, and see what works and what sounds the best. One thing you can do if you're by yourself and you're setting up your system, one thing you could do is if you have access to a monitor, you could put that monitor on stage, let's say again mid-stage, and you could play sound music through that monitor as well as music through the house speakers, and try to match them up volume-wise so that the balance is pretty much similar between both the monitor and the house speakers, and then start to adjust the delay on those main speakers. If you're out in the house and you can do it from an iPad, that's great because now you can hear what's going on. But if you start to put some delay on those main speakers and you continue to increase the amount of time that the speakers are being delayed, you'll eventually start to hear that sound being pushed back towards the monitor. And now the monitor seems to be the focus of your attention, or the focus of where the sound is coming from, instead of the main speakers. And this is really an effective tool that you can use to try and create a much more natural experience for the listener. So if you get a chance, play around. If you've got some time before you're setting up while you're setting up your sound system, before your tech week starts, before your rehearsals start, and you're able to access some processing, play around with the delay and see if you can recognize how that Haas Effect principle really affects your perception of where the sound source is. It really can go a long way towards relocating that sound source and pushing it back towards the stage to give a much more natural reaction from the sound coming off the stage, and a much more natural experience for your listeners in the audience. It's one tool that I really love using, and it's really cool how when I'm setting up a system and I have someone there with me, sometimes a director, and I ask them to start listening as I delay the speakers, and they'll really start to hear how the sound is moving from focus on the main speakers and it's moving back towards the stage. And it's a really cool effect, and they're always impressed with how that works. And so if I would strongly suggest, if you get a chance and you get an opportunity to do some processing on your sound system, start using some delay and see how it really adds to the natural experience of the entire production.